Welcome back, everybody. Today we're getting into this rifle right here. This is the Romanian PSL 54. It's actually come in under a number of different names over the years, depending on who the importer was, the import time period, etc. However, what it is it's a Romanian-made squad designated marksman type rifle. Some folks will refer to it as a sniper rifle. It has certainly been employed in that role, since it was fielded. However, if you look at Soviet doctrine, it definitely is more of a squad designated marksman type rifle, or a DMR type rifle, as we would define it here in the United States. So it wasn't designed to have, pinpoint match grade accuracy, which we'll test here in just a second, but it was designed to extend the range that the average comm block soldier could get over something like their AK or even RPKs, etc. So it really is basically an overgrown AK-47 or an overgrown RPK, really, due to a couple of number of different features it has on there. So quick history lesson here. The reason it's not a Dragunov or an SVD, and the Romanians had to come up with their own version of it here, is that they had kind of a schism there with the Russians back in the, what would it be, late 60s or mid 60s. Russia, wanted to put down an uprising in Czechoslovakia, and not all the comm bloc or Warsaw Pact nations supported it. So Russia said, all of you guys can come support our effort here in Czechoslovakia, and some countries said no. Romania was one of those countries, and because of that, the Russians didn't exactly willingly give them military technology support. Following that, so the Romanians had to come up with their own version of what was, of course, the Dragunov. So the Dragunov is a fantastic rifle in terms of sophistication. It's a much more refined rifle, but the folks over at Cougar, the factory there, they actually consulted with the folks over at the Zastava Arms plant as well, and came up with this. I think some of the first prototypes were out in 1970, and then it was adopted officially, I believe, in 1975, and it has seen a ton of use around the world. Very, very popular design. It's simple, it's reliable, it's rugged, it works, all of those sorts of things. So it's a cool rifle, cool design. But how does it shoot? Like I said, it's not designed to be a sniper rifle. It's just designed to extend the effective range of a squad. So if you think about, like, even in the United States, but it's true for comm bloc folks as well, generally in your squad, you're going to have some machine guns, somebody's going to have a designated marksman type rifle, and then the rest of your guys are going to have your standard infantry fighting rifle. For the comm bloc folks, the AK, and that's the role this one here was decided or designed to fill. So before I get into any more yapping, I think I've gone on long enough. Let's go out to the range and actually shoot it, see what kind of groups we can get out of it with this particular system and this setup, then come back in and get into the details.
Time to test what kind of accuracy we can get out of this system. I actually debated putting a modern scope on there to just be a little bit more precise for this, but I nixed that idea because I think it's kind of cool to show what the actual system, the scope, and the rifle can do together. We have a few different loads for you guys here in the gun right now. Some Winchester brass case stuff. When I was down at Eric over at Iraq Veteran 888, when I was at his house, we shot some of this through some Mosins, and it was crazy accurate. They're finished Mosins. So I was very impressed with the load. I have not shot it through this load, this rifle. So I don't know how it's going to group. We're going to see. And then we have a couple others. But target downrange at 100 yards, CTK precision rest, fancy sock filled with sand, and that's it. So let's see how she does. From here, it looks like she's pretty high, but you guys would know that better than I do at this point with that load. All right, next up, stuff that people are probably more likely to shoot through these guns. We have some Tula ammo, steel case, steel jacket, bimetal jacket, whatever you want to call it. That was me, that was not the gun. All right, the last load up here is some heavy for caliber stuff with 182 grains, and this is PPU. It's just ball ammo. It's not matched or anything, but brass case stuff. We'll see how she does. If that one was off to the left, that was me. All right, let's go check them out. I'm not gonna lie, this is actually better than I thought we were gonna get here with this rifle, so that's good, right? First up there, we had the Winchester. And right there with the Winchester, we're right at 1 3/4 inches on that one. Then the tool is probably the one that surprises me the most. I kind of expected it to be pretty bad, but it's not. We're right at 1 7/8 inches, so just a little bit bigger there at the Tula. You guys can probably guess what the rifle's zeroed with, right? So came down here with the PPU and it shot excellent, guys. That is absolutely 100% an MOA group. We're probably center to center right at 7/8 of an inch. Thought I might have pulled one, but I guess not. Yeah, I'll take those all day long with a rifle in this caliber. Now that we've seen how it's shot, we'll get into the details and start here at the end and work our way back. We do have a pinned muzzle brake on there. You can see there's 4 different vents basically all the way around the muzzle brake. It does a good job at reducing the felt recoil. However, in terms of flash hiding, definitely not the best. You're going to get a good bit of flash on there. Now, these have varied over the years in terms of what comes into America. This one here is pinned on there, and there are no threads underneath. Some of them have been pinned with threads. Other ones have been threaded on, just depending on the batch that actually comes in. So continuing to move back, we do have our front sight post, and you guys can see it as it sits right now. The rifle is zeroed, so there's not canted, nothing like that. Everything's aligned as it should be. The barrel on the rifle is 24 inches long. It's cold hammer forged. It's chrome lined, and it's a relatively thin profile for a DMR style gun compared to what's out there. It is a little bit on the thin side. Now that said, if it was thicker, it would really be front heavy because it's a little bit front heavy as it is. But you guys may be able to see in some of the slow-mo video that I took with it, it's kind of whipping around. Now all rifles will do that, but of course a thicker one would do it a little bit less. Regardless, it shoots just fine, as you guys saw out there, so you can't really complain too much about that. Military rifles, of course, are going to have bayonet lugs on the gas block here, but on the imported one here, it's shaved off just to make it more state compliant, I would imagine. In the gas block there, we have that 45-degree gas block, which is pretty common of most AKs that were designed around the time this rifle was. The handguards on this current batch of rifles has this nice blonde wood furniture on there. I've scuffed mine up a little bit because that tends to be what I do. However, the furniture has varied on import models over the years, so you may see some other ones out there if you're shopping on the secondhand market. We do have a sling swivel point up here on the left, again, traditional AK style. Now, one of my criticisms of the rifle in terms of practical use for sure is going to be the lack of ability to really stabilize it without a rest when shooting from various positions. So, you know, there's not really a good way, as it comes from the factory anyway, to add a bipod. Now, you can change these out. There are aftermarket handguards out there to do so. And of course, really, it's wood. You could screw a little M-LOK Picatinny rail in there or something like that, and it absolutely would work. However, again, from the factory as it comes, there's just not really a great way to get it steady in the prone position, which I think a lot of people for a SPR type rifle are kind of going to want to be shooting it in. So just something to throw out there. But, you know, throw down a bag or something like that. And as you guys have seen, it shoots just fine. The version of the PSL that you guys are seeing here is an American import version. So just like I had mentioned earlier with the bayonet lugs, there's a few things that are different on this than how you would see the rifle configured in several other countries around the world where it was exported or in military exports. So we'll kind of point those out as we go along, but one of them is right here. So here we have our American markings on there. So it's Romarm Cougar or Cougar, depending on who you ask, made in Romania. CAI, which is Century Arms International, who's the importer of this. Right above that there, you'll see we do have that bulged front trunnion. That's there just to reinforce it, just like it is on an RPK or several other designs of the AK pattern out there. It's just the higher pressure with the 7.60 by 5.4R round. There's a number of things they did to try to make it be able to handle that heavier recoiling round, and that's just one of them there. Continuing up top, we have an AK style rear sight on there. This one's graduated all the way out to 1,200 meters.
that said, good luck actually using it and getting hits out of that distance with some iron sights. It's going to be pretty tough to see and maybe not that usable at those distances, but for those folks who like to sort of dial in with their iron sights, you can do so. And one thing that's cool about this rifle is that, as you guys can see here with the scope mounted up, the iron sights are still perfectly usable. So we'll get to the scope in here in just a second, but if you needed to take like a quick shot or something like that, you can get a flash sight picture with your sights just fine with a nice normal cheek weld. There's nothing abnormal about it or anything like that, so it's definitely usable. You have good backup iron sights as it comes. On the left side of the receiver, we do have this PSL marking on there, and PSL is not an American thing. That actually is something the Romanians use. The word it actually stands for, I'm not going to even attempt to pronounce 3 words rather, but it actually in Romanian just means scoped rifle. So there's that. And then we also have our caliber designation. One thing I should point out is that the rivets on this rifle look good, with the exception of this one. For some reason or other, it's a little bit pushed in, but again, that's, you know, ComBlock factory stuff. Seems to work just fine. Now, getting into the actual scope itself, the actual issued ones that would be issued to most contract military rifles would have a tritium reticle in there, and then of course it's etched as well. This is a 4-power scope. And this one here is by a company called NPZ. It's one of the more common ones out there. And I gotta tell you, it's pretty darn well made. I've been impressed with it for what it is. It does have a little cover on there, and it actually ships with a little camouflage scope cover that you can throw on there as well. It is powered, so up here we have the on and off switch. It does have a single, or rather double A battery there that you see in the rear that it takes. And when you want to throw it on, you just flip the switch up. It's kind of crazy, but it's got a protected switch there. It just seems so old school, but it really works quite well. Of course, it does have the ability to quickly detach from the rifle itself. And I should point out, this is actually the second scope I had. The first one that came with it, it just would not work. It would not stay zero at all. It would just lose zero like crazy. And as you guys can see there, it's pretty snugly mounted on there. But it mounts up on your side rail here. And these scopes here are kind of all based on the PSOP scope of lore that the Russians came out with years ago. I have no idea if I'll be able to get my camera to focus. Probably not. Regardless, though, this one here has a reticle that you guys can see that I'm rolling in. And this is definitely one of the original combat BDC style reticles out there. And if you think about the time that this rifle came about, in this scope in particular, you know, 50s and 60s time frame, that these were really being fielded en masse. Of course, they're being experimented with, you know, back in World War II, these types of reticles. This is an auto-ranging BDC. You know, if you look at like the ACSS that we have today, this is kind of the granddaddy of it. It's got the graduations there to range an individual out to 1,000 meters and then engage them with either holdovers or by dialing in. I'll probably do a full video on these types of scopes one day, because we do get a lot of questions about it, but that's how you are able to actually zero it. So you can zero it, and then at that point you can either just set your elevation how you want to, and then windage, of course, is zeroed here, but I think most folks probably are not dialing in their windage. But either way, with the covers here, you can see where your setting's at, so that way you don't randomly have it on the wrong setting and just throw a shot. But yeah, these scopes they're pretty darn impressive for what they are. Looking at them, they look like they wouldn't be applicable, I guess you could say, in you know, modern times, but I can tell you they'd still get the job done just fine. PSL mags look an awful lot like SVD mags, however they are not interchangeable, as I probably already emphasized in the beginning of the video, but you guys can see there's some sort of intricate little things that are going on here. These cutouts back here look a little bit out of place when you look at most magazines, but you got to remember that's because it has a rimmed cartridge that it fires, so it's actually a little wider there for the rim of the cartridge to go in there and feed. And these also have a bolt hold open feature, which we'll show you here in just a second how that works, but pretty cool for the times. Now, unfortunately, if you guys are watching this as I'm filming it, 2020, these are not inexpensive. It does come with one. The current imports do, but again, they're not cheap if you want to stock up on them. Good news for me is I stocked up on them years ago, but but they're not cheap at all, unfortunately, right now, guys, if you're just getting into the game. So here you guys can see our safety lever, and as you note, there is no automatic firing position or marking on there, just this is a safe and fire, and that's the same on the military rifles as well. However, there is a difference, again, we're going to point out here between military rifles and these ones here that are brought into the US. So the original PSL has a, make sure we're clear, just double check, and we are. The original PSL is actually a safer design than the one that's brought into the US, thanks to our friends at the ATF. So there's actually a little sear safety lever that goes through on the original ones. These receivers do not accommodate for that, and that's because the ATF, with kind of a third pin, which is essentially what it looks like. Hopefully I'll roll in photos here so you guys can see it. They think that would make it too easy to convert to auto. Now that's absurd. Who would want one of these in auto anyway? It would just, you wouldn't be able to hit anything with the second shot. But regardless, so they have to redo the receivers for these rifles that are brought into the US because the ATF doesn't want your rifle to be as safe as it's designed to be. Obviously, it's still a perfectly fine, safe rifle though, guys. So there is that. You can see all the markings from the cases hitting it as it goes out. That's just got good, honest wear and tear on there. The actual magazine release is basically, again, just an overgrown AK. You can see it locks in there just fine, lock and lock type design. And additionally, our safety is just an enlarged safety. Back here on the rear, we do have these reinforcing plates, and we'll show you a little bit more of that once we take it apart. Again, that's just to help the gun hold up to the added abuse that the 7.62 by 5.4R round has versus the 7.62 by 3.9. The stock here to viewers in America may look somewhat California compliant, but that's as it was designed. This is not some sort of American thing. That's how all of them are, and looks very similar as well to the SVDs that are out there. However, we do have our sling swivel point back here at the rear. Of course, you have a steel butt pads. There's not a lot of recoil relief that you're getting there, and it's hollowed out there, and it absolutely favors right-handed shooters the way that slope is there. Additionally, with the slightly offset mount that we have there as well, it is a right-handed shooter's gun for sure. Lefties absolutely can employ it, but it's definitely optimized for the right-handed shooter. Before I get into disassembly, I want to talk about the trigger a little bit. It is very AK-ish. However, compared to some AK triggers out there, it's a little rougher actually, which was probably surprising to some of you guys out there who have not actually handled one of these. Now I have another PSL that I've had for years. You guys have probably seen it on the channel, and it's the same on that one. So we have kind of the AK roll that we have here all the way through. It's not a super predictable break, but it's a little bit rougher, like I said, than some of my other ones out there. Some people complain about AK trigger slap. This has none of that at all. That, generally speaking, is associated with full auto triggers anyway. Obviously, like we said, this one is not intended for full auto fire from the design. And taking it apart, standard AK stuff, you're just going to push it in there. We have a ribbed top cover like a lot of the Romanian guns of that era. Of course, recoil spring and guide rod, and our bolt carrier and assembly. And just looking in there, a couple things I want to point out that are a little bit different. Let me zoom in here real quick. So like we said, we have this reinforced piece back here. Again, that is just to help with the added force as this gigantic, relative to AK anyway, gigantic carrier is coming back with all the force there that you have from the 7.62 by 5.4R round. Looking in there, you guys can see the trigger with those wire springs. Again, very typical AK style. And then when you go forward there, there's something that looks a little bit out of place. This thing right here, what the heck is that? Well, that's actually the bolt catch on the last round bolt hold. And so if you look here, when we put the magazine in, try to do it so I don't catch it, and there you go. It pushes that up, and that will actually hold the bolt to the rear. And unlike, like a bolt hold open AK follower, when you release it, it doesn't actually go down, and the bolt doesn't actually go forward under real tension with the bolt in there. I assure you, it would stay to the rear, and then when you load up a fresh mag, all you got to do is tug on the bolt carrier, and it goes right back in there. So definitely a cool feature on that one. You guys can look in the chamber area. It looks a little bit different, probably, if I can get my camera to focus, than some AKs, and again, that's just to accommodate that rimmed cartridge. You guys can see the chrome lining in there, and everything looks good there up front, no issues at all. That's a black mark, not a chip, if I could actually get that off my finger. But yeah, everything's looking good wear-wise. Moving on to the carrier, you guys can see it looks just like a regular AK, just much larger in terms of scale. Some wear marks going on there, just normal wear and tear. In terms of function, again, it's exactly like an AK, just overgrown and much larger there. All the numbers on these do match, at least on my example anyway. And you guys can see the carrier there is lightened up a little bit, just again to reduce the amount of mass that's going back and smashing in to the back of that receiver. I think that covers most of the details on the rifle, the design, and those sorts of things. However, there's a couple things I didn't touch on so far. Number one is going to be reliability. The rifle has had 0 malfunctions. It's got just under 1,000 rounds through it right now. The vast majority of those were fired with tool ammo from LAX Ammo, and probably 100 or so rounds of Winchester brass case went through it as well. Now, I should point out one thing before finishing the video out. So you guys saw I got some good groups from some heavier loads out there. Now, this rifle was designed for light ammo, so like 150 to 160 grain, 147 grain, somewhere in that range, 7.60 by 5.4R rounds. So if you're going to fire heavier ball through it, I recommend, like if you're going to do it on volume, not just for like an accuracy test in a video, I recommend switching out the piston to like a K&S Precision one, which they do make, that will reduce the gas flow, because as we already pointed out several times, it's got all these things to mitigate the extra recoil, because again, unlike the Dragunov, it's not a sophisticated design in terms of the operational system. So when you start running heavier stuff, or if you want to run it suppressed or whatever the case may be, that extra gas flow, you could definitely get cracking back in your receiver. So it's something you don't want to do. If you're firing with the light ball stuff, it'll go all day, and you know the rifle will outlive you. But that's just a caveat I wanted to put on there, because it's important to know if you're looking at buying one of these rifles. So yep, reliability was awesome. The groups on this rifle actually surprised me. Like I said, I have another PSL. It doesn't shoot this good. So very likely, this is my opinion anyway, it's probably just, you know, the folks over there at Cougar making better products and not just relying on sloppy com block tolerances. Because if you guys have been around the AK game for a while, you know, if you looked at it like, I don't know, 15 years ago, everybody would say, you know, a 4 MOA group out of an AK was pretty good. However, nowadays, not just US made, but even foreign AKs are coming in consistently grouping 3 or better, and a lot of times you had around 2 with decent ammo. So I wouldn't doubt rather that those same modifications and improvements have been put on the modern versions. So that's a good thing. One thing that's a bad thing is that in 2020 anyway, prices are always changing like crazy. However, in 2020, these rifles are not inexpensive. So looking around the internet right now, you're probably going to find them anywhere roughly in the $1,600 to $2,200 range. That's going to include the scope, just for what it's worth. And again, that's not inexpensive. 15 years ago, you could find these rifles for like 700, 800 bucks. And that's actually what I got my first one at. But that's just not the case anymore. The war in Ukraine, the wars in the Middle East, etc., have just driven up demand for these rifles. So with that, price goes up. It just is what it is. So in terms of what the rifle offers for the price point, you know, if you look around the market right now and say you want like a big bore type of, or like a, you know, like a, what's the word for it, like a battle rifle cartridge, there's other options out there in the US market that are going to perform probably just as well and be less expensive. You know, you can put together Palmetto State Armory, Aero Precision, Ballistic Advantage, etc. Stag Arms, they're 308s. You can do that, or 6.5 Creedmoor, and you'll do that, and they'll probably be just as accurate, maybe even a little bit more accurate. And they're definitely going to cost under, you know, roughly $1,800–1,900. Now, if you want something that is just cool, right, and has that kind of com block vibe, and when you take it out at the range, everyone's going to walk up and ask you what it is, well then, yeah, this is definitely still a great rifle. This thing, absolutely, if I post pictures of it on Instagram or whatever, it gets a lot more reactions than my AR-10s do, I can tell you that much. So there is that. All in all, it's a great rifle. I have nothing bad to say about it at all. It's performed exceptionally, and it's got a really cool history as well. So I think that's pretty much it. If you guys have any questions about it that we didn't answer here in the video, by all means, you can post down below in the comment section. However, the best place to reach me is over at my Facebook page. Over there, if you shoot me a message, I do get back to everybody. Sometimes it takes me a few days, but there's only one of me and a few 100,000 of you, so please be patient. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. I look forward to seeing all of you in the next video. Check it out.